Chilling tales for dark nights.
There's no fear as potent as the fear of the unknown. Nothing as yet has been as terrifying as the infinite potential for horror which exists before the mask is removed. That's why we humans, in our naive misunderstanding of the universal order, are gripped by the mortal fear of death. And so we cling desperately onto even the most dreary and anguished lives, suffering any known evil over our release into the beyond. But death is not to be feared, because death is very well understood. We've witnessed it, caused it, measured and recorded it to the last dying flickering of our consciousness. Even as I lay dying, it seemed silly to me that I should be afraid of the emptiness which reason promised to expect. While I was alive, I wouldn't experience death, so there was no reason to be afraid now. When I was dead, I wouldn't be capable of experiencing anything. So fear still had no cause. That thought brought me great comfort as I felt the last erratic struggle from my heart against the inevitable conclusion. It wasn't until I was finally drifting off to sleep that a final intrusive doubt bubbled in my brain. What if it isn't death which is to be feared? What if it's what lies beyond? I slipped beyond mortal understanding, stepping into a world as far forsaken by reason as I was now from life. I was still in the hospital room, but the bustle of nurses and the beeping machines slowly dwindled, as though I was mired in swiftly descending dusk. It seemed as though every sound was an echo of what it once was, every sight a reflection. With each passing moment, the world was becoming less real. But all that sight and sound, all that being, it wasn't simply disappearing. It was transforming into a figure beside me. The less real my room became, the more real the figure was, until presently it existed in such sharp actuality that nothing beside it seemed real at all. His cloak was black, not the color black, but its essence. It was as though seeing a tiger after a lifetime of looking at a child's crude drawing and thinking that's all a tiger was. Reality flowed around his scythe like a brush through watercolors, and I could see each elementary particle and time itself cut across its blade. Surely this, I thought, this is why we were taught without words to fear death. I clutched at my hospital blanket, shrinking from the intensity of the Reaper's presence. But I knew in that moment that nothing could hide me from the specter's grasp. He was the only real thing in this world.
You're late.
I heard the words, only they weren't words. Oh, my head ached from the strain of this.
We don't have time for the usual speech. Hurry, now.
I felt myself swept up around him like so much dirt in a hurricane. Before I knew what was happening, we were outside the hospital, moving at such a frenzied pace that the world around me blurred into a dizzying tunnel of flashing light.
If you're lucky, it'll have gotten bored of waiting for you.
I had too many questions, all fighting for attention in the forefront of my brain without any making their way out.
You're quiet. I admire that. Usually people ask too much.
What's the point? I asked. My voice felt flat and dead compared to his overwhelming substance. How can I try to understand something so beyond mortal knowledge?
You can't, but it's still human nature to ask.
We weren't slowing. If anything, our pace was increasing. I wasn't running or flying or anything of that nature. It was more like the rest of the world was moving around us while we stood still. A vague darkness and a heavy damp smell made me guess that we'd gone underground, but I couldn't say for sure. One question then, I asked. What else is here besides you?
And that is why questions are pointless. Death is not a place or a person. It's all there is.
Troubling thought, but made more so by the growing howl which began reverberating through the rocks around me. We still seemed to be descending into the earth, and the air was growing warmer and denser now. The sound continued to mount as though the world itself was suffering. Then what is it?
What I'm here to protect you from.
The rocks split from a flash of his scythe, and the ground opened further into a sprawling cavern dwarfed by a subterranean lake. But I thought you said you were all there is.
No, I said death was all there is.
We weren't moving any longer. Light glinted off the scythe from some unseen source and streamed into the lake like a tributary. Once inside, the light didn't reflect or dissipate, but swirled and danced like luminescent oil. I thought you were death.
Death is not a person.
The light was taking a life of its own inside the water. The still surface began to churn with inexplicable energy. It took my scattered mind a long while to realize that I was the energy flowing into the lake. I still felt tangled up with the figure, but we now existed as a beam of light boiling into the water. I knew I wouldn't understand, but that didn't stop me from feeling frustrated. If death is all there is, then what is it? What was waiting for me? The water pressed in around me and I couldn't speak, although I could still draw breath somehow.
It is here.
Something was in the water around me. Hands grabbed me by the legs and began dragging me downward. I was amazed to even discover I had limbs again. They felt so alien to me that it was almost as though this body was not my own. Light flashed from the scythe, then again. The hands let go, and the howling rose once more. The Reaper was fighting something, although I couldn't make any sense of the battle, except for the madness of thrashing water. The howling earth reached its crescendo, and the screams made the water around me convulse and contract like living fluid. Had the Reaper cut it? Was I safe? I began to explore my new body in the water, but just when I thought I was beginning to gain control, the hands clutched me once more. I lurched downward, struggling in vain against their relentless grip. What is here? What is happening? But I couldn't sense the Reaper's presence any longer. The heat was unbearable, but the cold depths the hands were dragging me toward was even worse. I became aware of a blinding light at the bottom of the lake, and though I struggled, the hands dragged me inescapably onward.
I'm sorry. I couldn't fight it off. We'll try again next time.
The pressure, the heat, the noise, the hands dragging me into the blinding light. I closed my eyes and screamed. I was free from the water now, but I just kept screaming. I couldn't bear to look at it. Whatever had stolen me, whatever was death but it wasn't, whatever even the Reaper couldn't defeat.
Congratulations, he's a healthy baby boy.
Most people can't remember the day they die or the day they were born. And I know that they're the same.
The Cursed Mr. Mortiss by Michael Waldrep. Narrated by Marshall Ragsdale. I always loved traveling carnivals. They held a mystery to me as a child, with the way they appeared overnight in an open field. I rode my fair share of rides and even won a prize or two, but the sideshows fascinated me the most. The man who could eat anything, munching away on nails and light bulbs. The spider lady, with the body of a giant black widow and the head of a woman. I would line up to see them as many times as I could. I used to love carnivals. That changed when I was 12. My two best friends, Tommy and Wes, excitedly pounded on the front door of my house one morning. This wasn't unusual for us. During the summer months, they practically lived at my house. My mom didn't mind. We stayed out of trouble and out of her hair. My mom opened the door, and they fluttered by with the chorus of, "Good morning, Mrs. Tillman." Mom shook her head with a giggle, barely getting out of the way of the stampede.
"Morning, boys. Michael is in his room."
I was sitting on my bed, still in my PJs, when the dynamic duo crashed through the door and pounced on the bed. They both spoke at the same time, making it impossible to comprehend either of them. Wes clutched a paper tightly in his hands, shaking it to me. Tommy pointed at the paper with pure glee. Waving my hands, I attempted to get their attention.
"I can't hear both of you at once."
They stopped talking and looked at each other. A moment passed, and they both were back at it, trying to outspeak the other. Wes pointed to the flyer in his hand. Clearly, this was what they were so excited about. I took it from him. The flyer was for a new carnival that would be opening this weekend. That was just 2 days away. I wasn't sure why we hadn't seen any flyers previously. Usually we see the flyers a couple of weeks prior to the carnival's arrival, so maybe we just missed this one. Our town was pretty boring, so carnivals were a big deal to us kids. It was the closest some of us would ever get to seeing the world. Tommy pointed to the upper right corner of the flyer.
"Sneak preview Thursday night, 10 p.m.
I joined the others in the excited, unintelligible chatter. We cheered and made our plans for the evening. Convincing my mother to let me stay out late wasn't an easy task. Eventually, however, she relented on the condition that Tommy's sister, Anna, would be there. We were spending the night at Wes's house, so I also had to promise that we would be back to his house before midnight. We were set. Anna agreed to allow us to tag along with her, so long as we agreed to disappear once we arrived at the carnival. She didn't want her friends to see us. We also had to find our own way home. Our parents didn't know these little details. We assumed there was no need to worry them with the little things, like the ride home. We would figure that out after the carnival. The carnival was set up on county land, just a few miles from Wes's house. If we couldn't catch a ride, we could walk. We arrived at the carnival at 9:47 p.m. Anna dropped us off by the ticket booth, then disappeared in search of her friends. The excitement grew, and we could feel the electricity in the air. The night itself was dark, making the neon purple lights of the carnival all that much more brilliant. The carnival tents were a mixture of black and purple, giving them a dark yet regal property. It is true the majority of the lights were neon purple, but there were other lights mixed in. The occasional black light cast a glowing hue, making white clothing and the occasional smile light brilliantly.
"Neat!"
Tommy exclaimed. He was a man of many words, and most of them were the word neat. We purchased our tickets and waited for the gates to open. Shaking with anticipation, we stared up at the sign. It read, "The Mystical Carnival. Suspend your disbelief." The same name glowed in purple neon in the center of the Ferris wheel. Over by the tilt-a-whirl, organ music danced on the night breeze. The smell of fresh popcorn and cotton candy clung to our nostrils. In one word, it was magic. A little person, dressed in a black suit with a purple shirt, walked up to the gate and swung it open. He held a grumpy look on his face, but he waved us in. We smiled at him while we ran in. We skipped the Ferris wheel, opting for the scrambler instead. A quick game of rock, paper, scissors helped determine who got to be in the middle seat. Nothing like smashing your buddy while spinning at high velocity. Unfortunately, I lost. Next, we took on the Viking's Revenge. The giant boat, swinging high in the air, always made me feel like losing my lunch. That is why I always wait on the cotton candy until after. 11:15 p.m. came, and I begged Wes and Tommy to go see the sideshows with me. I couldn't miss them. We settled on watching the freak show. Wes grumbled that he wanted to get in line for the Ferris wheel. We knew the truth was that he was afraid. Wes was always skittish, especially when it was so dark outside. Tommy nudged Wes in the shoulder, and he reluctantly followed us.
5 minutes until showtime.
A raspy voice hissed from a PA system outside the black and purple tent hosting the show. We hurried in and found seats near the front row. It was during the show that I first saw him. His name was the cursed Mr. Mortiss. He was a terribly sad-looking clown. He stood well over 6 feet tall, wearing a white clown costume with black frills on the collar and sleeves. His bald head, well, all his skin, in fact, was covered in white paint. Mr. Mortiss's lips were nothing more than black slits, and black triangles sat above and below his eyes. He truly was a pathetic sight. When Mr. Mortiss moved, I noticed the bags under his eyes and his droopy cheeks. They made his face appear to be stuck in a perpetual frown. The announcer began his introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen,
He paused for effect.
welcome to this very special show. Tonight, you will witness the mystical powers beyond your imagination.
The announcer raised his hands above his head.
All fear and watch in awe the cursed Mr. Mortiss. He alone walks between the worlds of the living and the dead.
The lights dimmed on the stage.
Prior to this show, the cursed Mr. Mortiss sat in his isolated tomb, communing with the dead. They have given him the answers to questions. Questions you have yet to ask him.
A murmur went through the crowd.
He wrote the answers on these poster boards set before you, prior to your arrival.
Mr. Mortiss stood in front of the crowd, holding the large white boards.
Who will be the first to tempt fate and ask him a question?
The announcer asked the crowd. Wes fidgeted in his seat. I don't like this.
Stop being a worrywart,
said Tommy, punching Wes in the shoulder. The announcer pointed to a man in the front row in a tweed blazer.
Yes, sir, ask your question.
What are Saturday's winning lottery numbers? The crowd chuckled. Unfazed, Mortiss turned over the first card, which read, We shall not profit off the works of the dead. The crowd laughed and clapped in amazement. Mr. Mortiss said nothing. His expression never changed, although he did wag his finger at the man in the tweed jacket. The announcer interrupted the claps. The first one is always about money, folks.
Who has the next question?
A woman in the back row asked the second question.
How old am I?
The card was turned to reveal the number 42. The woman sat down in shock.
He's right.
The next question came. How did my father die? A man asked. The next card flipped by Mr. Mortiss read, St. Louis car crash. The crowd swung to the man asking the question. He's right. How did you know that? The cursed Mr. Mortiss just stared at him. They whispered in awe. Everyone. Except Tommy. He leaned over Wes to me and exclaimed,
They're working with the clown. This is all just a big screw job.
Mr. Mortiss turned his gaze to Tommy and cocked his head to the side, looking at him questioningly. The announcer chuckled and pointed to Tommy. "I see we have some doubters. Perhaps you would like to ask a question?" Tommy smirked at first, embarrassed that everyone heard him. He thought for a moment and looked back at the announcer, then to the cursed Mr. Mortiss.
"Sure, I have a question. When will I die?" "Well, well, well! Now there is a juicy question, my boy. Are you sure you want the answer?"
Tommy nodded defiantly.
"Fair enough. Show him his fate, O cursed one."
The announcer waved his hand to the clown. Mr. Mortiss brought the poster board over to Tommy and handed it to him. For a moment, he leered at the boy. I half expected him to attack Tommy, right there in front of everyone. But he didn't. The strange clown walked back to the stage. Tommy looked at the card and showed it to the crowd.
"It's blank?"
Tommy exclaimed.
"I guess the spirits didn't like your disbelief?"
The announcer boasted, and the crowd laughed. The brief moment of levity made even Tommy smile. But Wes didn't. Terror filled his face as Wes looked on at the poster board Tommy was holding. It wasn't blank to him. No one else seemed to notice. I didn't either, but I did see Wes turn pale. He turned from the sign towards the clown. Mr. Mortiss was staring directly at him. Wes jumped out of his seat and ran from the tent. We couldn't catch Wes until we were in front of the Ferris wheel. He told us what he read on the poster. "You will die tonight, boy."
It looked like the words were carved by a claw instead of ink. Then that freak clown was staring at me. "I didn't see anything on the sign. Maybe you thought you saw it?"
I tried to comfort my friend.
"Man, you were so freaked out!"
Tommy laughed.
"He did his job. Old Morty was trying to scare the piss out of you, and oh boy did he!"
Tommy circled Wes, inspecting him.
"You didn't crap yourself, did you?" "Stop it! I didn't crap myself, and I know what I saw!"
Wes scowled, shoving Tommy away. I checked my watch. It was now 11:45 p.m. Anna was nowhere to be found, and any hope for a ride home was gone. Tommy and I talked Wes into a few more rides before we left for his house. After the tilt-a-whirl, Wes seemed more like his old self.
"Come on, guys, let's hit the Ferris wheel before we go,"
Tommy said, dragging us along.
"We're already late, so what would it hurt to be a little later?"
The view from the top of the Ferris wheel was incredible. We could see for miles. The woods on the edge of the field swayed with the light breeze. To us, on the top of the world, the wind felt more like a hurricane. We were scared, but having so much fun. For a few minutes, all was good. Tommy spotted him first. A white figure standing on the edge of the woods, just outside the glow of the carnival. He was watching us. When the ride was over, we hopped off of the Ferris wheel. Tommy wanted to find the clown and confront him, but Wes and I said we just wanted to get back to his house. We were already late. Circling around the scrambler, we headed for the gate. We all came to a sudden stop, our feet planted firmly, as if the grass under our feet was holding us down. We all saw something by the exit, glowing bright from one of the black light bulbs. Another poster board leaned against the fence. Written on the poster board, in the same writing Wes described, were the words, "Leaving so soon. Have a nice trip home." Hardly the indicating evidence of a sinister conspiracy against 3 boys, I know, but there it was. We rushed through the parking area to get to the road. It felt better to be back on the sidewalk and away from the cursed Mr. Mortiss. He was now someone else's problem. Crossing the street, we exited the last of the light coming from the carnival. The air felt lighter here, even in the darkness. For a block, no one spoke. We were all a little freaked out. Even Tommy, who was always the bravest, or at least the most stubborn, of our group. The left side of the road offered a sidewalk, and the occasional dim streetlight. The right side was lined by the woods. The same woods we spotted Mr. Mortiss watching us from. We opted for the sidewalk and the safe distance from the woods. The silence was interrupted by the sounds of crunching leaves coming from the woods to our right. Our eyes scanned the woods for movement. With the wind, it was difficult to tell if anything was moving besides the trees. The crunching noise was getting closer. I was sure of it. Maybe it was fear, or too many scary movies, but we just had to see what was coming.
Do you see anything?
I whispered to Wes.
No, but it's moving towards that small clearing over there.
Wes pointed to a break between the trees, a little behind us. We watched intently, waiting for whatever it was. Something moved from the shadows into view. A long figure glided into the moonlight and paused.
It's a deer. Just a dumb deer.
Tommy smiled. We smiled too, over the fact that our worst fear was that we were being followed by... My thoughts cut off. Wes and I looked at Tommy in horror. Mr. Mortiss stood in the shadows behind him. We were so focused on the woods that we completely missed him. Mr. Mortiss made no movements, but held a long, large kitchen knife in one of his hands. I let out a scream so hard my eardrums throbbed. I'm sure my friends did as well, but I couldn't hear over my own fear. We ran, the night air rushing past. It couldn't be more than a mile to Wes's house. Turning on South Street with our backs to the woods, we peeked back to see if we were being followed. South Street offered more light, enough to tell nothing was moving behind us.
What the hell, man? Did you see that freak?
Tommy put his hands on his knees to catch his breath. I looked around.
Oh God, no!
I pointed down the street. Not in the direction we were coming from, but where we had been running to. Standing under one of the streetlights was Mr. Mortiss. Again, he didn't move towards us. He just watched, glaring at us with hatred. He was holding another poster, chest high. I am coming for you.
How did he get in front of us?
Wes screamed. Wes led us as we ducked between the houses and hopped a backyard fence.
Reed Nix lives here. Maybe he will let us in? We can knock on his window.
Motion lights in the backyard flashed on, cutting the darkness. Our eyes adjusted to the light, and there he stood again. Mortiss's silhouette stretched across the lawn towards us. He moved forward from the shadows. His eyes. What was wrong with his eyes? They were replaced by swirling pools. Grays and blacks churned in an endless vortex. He lifted his arm and pointed at us.
I don't want to die!
Wes cried. The cursed Mr. Mortiss pulled a knife from inside his sleeve.
You won't.
Tommy grabbed Wes and me by the collar, and we squeezed through a hole in the fence. Faster and faster we ran, across lawns and over trash cans. A few minutes stretched to an eternity, but we reached the safety of Wes's front door. The door swung open, and a dark silhouette filled the doorway.
Relax, guys. It's my dad.
Wes led us into his living room, into the safety of the light. Wes's father had been waiting up for us. A little late, isn't it, boys?
Sorry, Dad. We lost track of time.
We considered telling him about Mr. Mortiss, but we would just sound crazy. Really, were we going to tell him about being chased by a killer clown? We went to Wes's room to crash for the night, but I doubted any of us would actually sleep. The lights were kept off. We had gotten away from Mr. Mortiss, but there is no need to attract attention if he was still outside. Tommy decided taking turns watching out the window would be a good idea. We told ourselves we lost Mr. Mortiss, and that there was no way the man could have kept up with us. But those eyes made me wonder if he was even a man. We didn't take any chances. It was my turn to watch the yard. Tommy and Wes settled in, playing Mario Kart. I couldn't help but sneak a peek. After all, I was the reigning champion. Yoshi and I were unbeatable. I peeked out the window quickly, eager to get back to the epic race unfolding behind me. But I couldn't. There was something on the lawn. There wasn't much light, but I could make out a balloon. It floated just above the grass, with the string tied to the bottom dipping in and out of the grass. Besides that, it didn't move. I leaned towards my friends.
Guys, there is a balloon.
Wes and Tommy paused their game, with Mario midair about to crash into Luigi's roadster, and we all looked out the window. The balloon had moved closer. I could now see it was red.
That's weird. The balloon was closer to the road just a second ago.
Again, the balloon only bobbed slightly, still floating out of direct light. Trees and bushes cast shadows, and offered so many places to hide. We scanned the night, but found no clowns. The balloon drifted closer, dancing into the glow of the light from our window. We watched as it drifted closer and closer, as some unknown force was dragging it towards us. Something about the balloon wasn't right. The latex skin seemed to move. We focused on the balloon as it drifted into the light.
Oh God, it's bleeding.
Wes backed away from the window. Indeed, blood ran down the sides, dripping down the string. Tommy looked at me. His bottom lip quivered.
He's here. He found us.
Wes whimpered behind us, but we kept our gaze on the bloody balloon outside the window, watching the dripping. Our focus wouldn't have been broken had it not been the kicking on the floor behind us. We turned. The cursed Mr. Mortiss stood behind Wes, one hand covering his mouth, the other clutching a knife, which was held against Wes's throat. His eyes still glistened black spinning pools. He slid the blade against the tender flesh of Wes's neck. Wes crumbled to the floor. Mortiss lunged for Tommy.
No, leave me alone! You killed him! You killed him!
In his panic, Tommy knocked the knife from Mr. Mortiss's hand. Mortiss wrapped his hands around Tommy's neck and forced him to the bed. I could hear gagging and wheezing sounds. What should I do? I could run and maybe save myself. No, I had to fight to save my friend. The knife lay on the floor next to Wes's body. I resisted the urge to look at my friend, knowing I would lose my nerve. Grabbing the knife in hand, I plunged it into Mr. Mortiss's back. Out and in, over and over. I wouldn't stop until I heard this mute freak scream. Wes's father burst into the room and turned on the lights. His son lay dead on the floor, as did Tommy on the bed. There I stood, over Tommy's lifeless body, which was now covered in puncture holes. Wes's dad threw me to the ground, knocking the knife away. My head bounced off the hardwood floor, causing me to lose consciousness. As I drifted off, my eyes fixed on the open closet door. From the darkness, the cursed Mr. Mortiss stared at me, smiling. Like I said before, my family moved away after that summer. It is hard to live in a small town when your son is convicted of murdering his two closest friends. No one believed my story. Why would they? I was found standing over the bodies, holding a bloody knife. It has been 22 years, and I'm scheduled to be released next week. My family now lives in West Taylor, far away from Historia and the hate they received because of me. Mom said she can't wait for me to get out. She said she has something special planned for me. The carnival is coming to town. She knew how much I loved those.
Just £3 a month can save a child's life. Written by Kevin Thomas. Narrated by Darragh Counihan. I apologize. I apologize it's come to this for you to figure this all out. I apologize that I had to bring it all so close to home before you connected the dots. I thought you were more perceptive than that. Your arguments were always so convincing that I presumed you'd be able to see the logic in what I was doing without me needing to spell it out like this. But obviously not. So, for that, I apologize. Oh, you probably don't even know how far back this goes. That probably irritates me the most. That's why I need to explain this to you now. You probably don't even remember me. I was just a friend of a friend of a friend in another bustling party. You probably met 50 others like me that night. I'm not surprised I didn't stick in your mind. But that's not the issue. Because you stuck in mine. Not because of how you looked or what you did. Please, don't confuse this as some misguided attempt to address deeply repressed sexual issues. I'm actually quite handsome, and I've been told I can be rather charming on occasion. Indeed, that very same party, I didn't leave alone. Oh, don't worry. She wasn't one of the girls I used to make my point, though she did give me your name so I could add you on Facebook, an invite you unthinkingly accepted. No, it wasn't your outfit, nor the amount you drank, nor the way you danced that sent me down this road. It was your words. I remember it clearly. I'm not a big drinker. I was still supping my only beer when you started your speech. You were not even addressing me as much as the whole room. Let me tell you, I was enthralled. Truly enthralled. You used words like artists use brushes and butchers use knives. You wove tapestries and then slaughtered them. Your arguments were beautiful. Your logic infallible. I felt my eyes open and my horizon shatter as you effortlessly explored our social ills. You talked about third world poverty, and I was nearly wrought to tears. The way you described their poverty and the injustice of our Western opulence was breathtaking. You even made reference to that great Jewish carpenter of lore, and how he would despise the riches reaped in his name while his flocks starve. You truly opened my mind to a whole new way of thinking. The very next day, I sold my books and the rest of my meager possessions that were worth anything, in order to raise as much cash as I could. I triumphantly took the couple of hundred the sale had garnered and handed them over to Oxfam. The woman at the till was delighted with the donation, even going as far as to print me off a certificate of donation and giving me a box of leaflets to pass out to friends. I had the certificate in my hand when I used the library computer to track your address through Facebook. I know, that was an invasion of privacy, and I'm sorry, but I had to tell you how you changed my life. I had to show you what I'd done. You had to know the impact your words had had. But when I got to your place, when I got there... Look, I'm telling you this because you have to understand why I've done all this, alright? You have to understand why I had to make you see. I couldn't believe what I saw when I got to your place and looked in those windows. The opulence, the sheer, hypocritical, decadent luxury in which you lived. I had just given up everything I owned to save others based on your poetical arguments, and then I saw the blinding hypocrisy which you lived. You claimed we needed to erase third world debt and tax the rich and increase foreign aid and redistribute food and water and buy mosquito nets and countless other things that flowed like honey from your mouth but now tasted rotten as I saw the Mini Cooper in your drive, the HD TV on the entertainment center. There was a PS3 and an Xbox sitting underneath, an iPad lazily hibernating on the couch. How dare you lecture me about poverty? You had food rotting in your bins, and you dare demand that others do more for the homeless? Forgive my bluntness, but I saw the whole room reduced to the currency of starving children. You told me that £3 would buy a mosquito net that would prevent a child dying. You lectured me that £5 would build a well that would give them safe drinking water. Yet, there it was, £500 worth of expensive TV just sitting on the shelf. Your house was a mausoleum. On every shelf, in every cupboard, in every bin, in every wardrobe were totems of international poverty. You watch the same advert about the same starving children that I do, but then you sentence 30 more to death in order to go HD. You sickened me. I had to make you see. I realized what it was. You were too far removed from it. You didn't equate your TV with dead children 3,000 miles away. Why would you? But that's what it was. So I had to bring that home to you. So, I made my first point, and posted you one of the leaflets I got from Oxfam, urging you to donate the same day. I thought that when you'd connected the two, you'd make a donation, and that would be that. You'd have seen the point. But when you saw the news report about the homeless woman I used to make my point, you didn't make the connection between it and the leaflet. You threw it away. You didn't even read it. So I had to make another point. Oh, I made several more points with the homeless in your neighborhood. Each time posting you a leaflet, urging you to make the donation that would end this, but you never made the connection between the two. You kept throwing my leaflets away with the junk mail. You wouldn't even read the pleas written therein. One donation would have ended this. One thing that would have shown me that you'd heeded your own advice. But nothing. Eventually, it became dangerous to keep making the point in the same way. I had to make another point. This time, it was one of the baristas where you bought your overpriced coffee. Maybe you spotted the missing posters around town. Maybe not. Maybe you've not even noticed he's gone. But you still didn't get the connection when you threw away the latest leaflet, begging for a donation. You could have ended this if you'd recognized the point I was making. But you didn't. Today, I've already lost track of how many points I've made. You've missed them all and thrown away all my leaflets. Ruined every chance you had of stopping this and adding the blood of my points to the death toll in your living room. See, if you're reading this, you might be horrified. Your faux horror amuses me. I can almost see you, indulgently crying with your hand theatrically clasped over your comically agape mouth. It makes no difference. Let me ask you a question. Knowing what you do now, knowing it was all about you, would you do anything different? Would you go back to my first point and make a donation like I wanted you to? Why? If you'd sell all your stuff to save that missing barista or all those homeless, why not for all those starving children and beaten animals? Or any of the countless other unfortunates whose pleas for help you turn over from or throw away while at the same time polluting Facebook feeds with the demands for likes or ruining dinner parties by waxing lyrical about how everyone except you should change their ways and save the world. Why does it need to be someone you know before you understand? How can you cry for the deaths of your friends and family on one hand, then sentence 1,000 more to death every time you want a new computer? I'm giving you one last chance. I'm writing this letter so I can hide it in one last leaflet. I hope you notice it in time to read it. I won't even make a point for this one. You can have this one for free. But rest assured, I had better see a donation. Or my next point will be one you won't soon forget.
The Pale Man by Julius Long. I have not yet met the man in number 212. I do not even know his name. He never patronizes the hotel restaurant, and he does not use the lobby. On the 3 occasions when we passed each other by, we did not speak, although we nodded in a semi-cordial, non-committal way. I should like very much to make his acquaintance. It is lonesome in this dreary place. With the exception of the aged lady down the corridor, the only permanent guests are the man in number 212 and myself. However, I should not complain, for this utter quiet is precisely what the doctor prescribed. I wonder if the man in number 212, too, has come here for a rest. He is so very pale. Yet, I cannot believe that he is ill, for his paleness is not of a sickly cast, but rather wholesome in its ivory clarity. His carriage is that of a man enjoying the best of health. He is tall and straight. He walks erectly and with a brisk, athletic stride. His pallor is no doubt congenital, else he would quickly tan under this burning summer sun. He must have traveled here by auto, for he certainly was not a passenger on the train that brought me, and he checked in only a short time after my arrival. I had briefly rested in my room and was walking down the stairs when I encountered him ascending with his bag. It is odd that our venerable bellboy did not show him to his room. It is odd, too, that with so many vacant rooms in the hotel, he should have chosen number 212 at the extreme rear. The building is a long, narrow affair, 3 stories high. The rooms are all on the east side, as the west wall is flush with a decrepit business building. The corridor is long and drab, and its stiff, bloated paper exudes a musty, unpleasant odor. The feeble electric bulbs that light it shine dimly as from a tomb. Revolted by this corridor, I insisted vigorously upon being given number 201, which is at the front and blessed with southern exposure. The room clerk, a disagreeable fellow with a Hitler mustache, was very reluctant to let me have it, as it is ordinarily reserved for his more profitable transient trade. I fear my stubborn insistence has made him an enemy. If only I had been as self-assertive 30 years ago. I should now be a full-fledged professor instead of a broken-down assistant. I still smart from the cavalier manner in which the president of the university summarily recommended my vacation. No doubt he acted for my best interests. The people who have dominated my poor life invariably have. Oh well, the summer's rest will probably do me considerable good. It is pleasant to be away from the university. There's something positively gratifying about the absence of the graduate student face. If only it were not so lonely. I must devise a way of meeting the Pale Man in number 212. Perhaps the room clerk can arrange matters. I have been here exactly a week, and if there is a friendly soul in this miserable little town, he has escaped my notice. Although the tradespeople accept my money with flattering eagerness, they studiously avoid even the most casual conversation. I am afraid I can never cultivate their society unless I can arrange to have my ancestors recognized as local residents for the last 150 years. Despite the coolness of my reception, I have been frequently venturing abroad. In the back of my mind, I have cherished hopes that I might encounter the Pale Man in number 211. Incidentally, I wonder why he has moved from number 212. There's certainly little advantage in coming only one room nearer to the front. I noticed the change yesterday when I saw him coming out of his new room. We nodded again, and this time I thought I detected a certain malign satisfaction in his somber black eyes. He must know that I am eager to make his acquaintance, yet his manner forbids overtures. If he wants to make me go all the way, he can go to the devil. I am not the sort to run after anybody. Indeed, the surly diffidence of the room clerk has been enough to prevent me from questioning him about his mysterious guest. I wonder where the Pale Man takes his meals. I have been absenting myself from the hotel restaurant and patronizing the restaurants outside. At each I have ventured inquiries about the man in number 210. No one at any restaurant remembered his having been there. Perhaps he has entree into the Brahmin homes of this town. And again, he may have found a boarding house. I shall have to learn if there be one. The Pale Man must be difficult to please, for he has again changed his room. I am baffled by his conduct. If he is so desirous of locating himself more conveniently in the hotel, why does he not move to number 202, which is the nearest available room to the front? Perhaps I can make his inability to locate himself permanently an excuse for starting a conversation. "I see we are closer neighbors now," I might casually say. But that is too banal. I must await a better opportunity. He has done it again. He is now occupying number 209. I am intrigued by his little game. I wasted hours trying to fathom its point. What possible motive could he have? I should think he would get on the hotel people's nerves. I wonder what our combination bellhop chambermaid thinks of having to prepare 4 rooms for a single guest. If he were not stone deaf, I would ask him. At present, I feel too exhausted to attempt such an enervating conversation. I am tremendously interested in the Pale Man's next move. He must either skip a room or remain where he is, for a permanent guest, a very old lady, occupies number 208. She has not budged from her room since I have been here, and I imagine she does not intend to. I wonder what the Pale Man will do. I await his decision with the nervous excitement of a devotee of the track on the eve of a big race. After all, I have so little diversion. Well, the mysterious guest was not forced to remain where he was, nor did he have to skip a room. The lady in number 208 simplified matters by conveniently dying. No one knows the cause of her death, but it is generally attributed to old age. She was buried this morning. I was among the curious few who attended her funeral. When I returned home from the mortuary, I was in time to see the Pale Man leaving her room. Already he has moved in. He favored me with a smile whose meaning I have tried in vain to decipher. I cannot but believe that he meant it to have some significance. He acted as if there were between us some secret that I failed to appreciate. But then perhaps his smile was meaningless after all, and only ambiguous by chance, like that of the Mona Lisa. My man of mystery now resides in number 207, and I am not the least surprised. I would have been astonished if he had not made his scheduled move. I have almost given up trying to understand his eccentric conduct. I do not know a single thing more about him than I knew the day he arrived. I wonder whence he came. There is something indefinably foreign about his manner. I am curious to hear his voice. I like to imagine that he speaks the exotic tongue of some faraway country. If only I could somehow inveigle him into conversation. I wish that I were possessed of the glib assurance of a college boy who can address himself to the most distinguished celebrity without batting an eye. It is no wonder that I am only an assistant professor. I am worried. This morning I awoke to find myself lying prone upon the floor. I was fully clothed. I must have fallen exhausted there after I returned to my room last night. I wonder if my condition is more serious than I had suspected. Until now, I have been inclined to discount the fears of those who had pulled a long face about me. For the first time, I recall the prolonged handclasp of the president when he bade me goodbye from the university. Obviously, he never expected to see me alive again. Of course, I am not that unwell. Nevertheless, I must be more careful. Thank heaven I have no dependents to worry about. I have not even a wife, for I was never willing to exchange the loneliness of a bachelor for the loneliness of a husband. I can say in all sincerity that the prospect of death does not frighten me. Speculation about life beyond the grave has always bored me. Whatever it is or is not, I'll try to get along. I have been so preoccupied about the sudden turn of my own affairs, I have neglected to make note of a most extraordinary incident. The pale man has done an astounding thing. He has skipped 3 rooms and moved all the way to number 203. We are now very close neighbors. We shall meet oftener, and my chances for making his acquaintance are now greater. I have confined myself to my bed during the last few days and have had my food brought to me. I even called a local doctor, whom I suspect to be a quack. He looked me over with professional indifference and told me not to leave my room. For some reason, he does not want me to climb stairs. For this bit of information, he received a $10 bill, which, as I directed him, he fished out of my coat pocket. A pickpocket could not have done it better. He had not been gone long when I was visited by the room clerk. That worthy suggested with a great show of kindly concern that I use the facilities of the local hospital. It was so modern and all that. With more firmness than I had been able to muster in a long time, I gave him to understand that I intended to remain where I am. Frowning sullenly, he stiffly retired. The doctor must have paused long enough downstairs to tell him a pretty story. It is obvious that he is afraid I shall die in his best room. The pale man is up to his old tricks. Last night when I tottered down the hall, the door of number 202 was ajar. Without thinking, I looked inside. The pale man sat in a rocking chair, idly smoking a cigarette. He looked up into my eyes and smiled that peculiar, ambiguous smile that has so deeply puzzled me. I moved on down the corridor, not so much mystified as annoyed. The whole mystery of the man's conduct is beginning to irk me. It's all so inane, so utterly lacking in motive. I feel that I shall never meet the pale man. But at least I am going to learn his identity. Tomorrow I shall ask the room clerk and deliberately interrogate him. I know now. I know the identity of the pale man, and I know the meaning of his smile. Early this afternoon, I summoned the room clerk to my bedside. "Please tell me," I asked abruptly, "who is the man in number 202? The clerk stared wearily and uncomprehendingly. "You must be mistaken. That room is unoccupied." "Oh, but it is," I snapped in irritation. "I myself saw the man there only 2 nights ago. He's a tall, handsome fellow with dark eyes and hair. He is unusually pale. He checked in the day that I arrived." The hotel man regarded me dubiously, as if I were trying to impose upon him. but I assure you there is no such person in the house. As for his checking in when you did, you were the only guest we registered that day." "What? Why, I've seen him 20 times. First, he had number 212 at the end of the corridor. Then he kept moving toward the front. Now he's next door in number 202. The room clerk threw up his hands. "You're crazy," he exclaimed, and I saw that he meant what he said. I shut up at once and dismissed him. After he had gone, I heard him rattling the doorknob of the pale man's door. There is no doubt that he believed the room to be empty. Thus it is that I can now understand the events of the past few weeks. I now comprehend the significance of the death in number 207. I even feel partly responsible for the old lady's passing. After all, I brought the pale man with me. But it was not I who fixed his path. Why he chose to approach me room after room through the length of this dreary hotel, why his path crossed the threshold of the woman in number 207, those mysteries I cannot explain. I suppose I should have guessed his identity when he skipped the 3 rooms that night I fell unconscious upon the floor. In a single night of triumph, he advanced until he was almost to my door. He will be coming by and by to inhabit this room, his ultimate goal. When he comes, I shall at least be able to return his smile of grim recognition. Meanwhile, I have only to wait beyond my bolted door. The door swings, slowly open.
Animal Cruelty by Martin Smith. Read by Kristin, Holland. Up and away from the evening murmur of North Hollywood, a shadow clung to a dull green apartment building, and with great caution and short explosions of animation approached the open window of Henry and Tabitha Herman. At the window, Henry busied himself with sketches and plans at his desk. The blue pencil ghost of a new indoor shopping mall stared back at him, but Henry's hands had become still of late. Nothing was finished, but he had nothing more to add. His shirt stuck to his back. He wiped the sweat from his moustache, dropped his pencil into an old yogurt pot, and looked in on Tabitha.
"And then he briefly exercised her and she became perfectly normal,"
the man in the red gown said on television. Tabitha's forehead was damp, her breathing shallow. She faced the wall, away from the crib. Henry meant to return it to the store last week. He made a mental note that he knew he would not have the heart to action. He closed the dresser to hide the unopened toys and the unhugged dolls. Greeting cards lined the dresser. "Congratulations, it's a girl." With deepest sympathy. The man in the red gown asked them for a donation. Henry brushed Tabitha's hair from her eye and left to run a bath. Tabitha slept. The water was cool. Henry lay back, his stomach an island amidst the foam, and placed a cloth over his eyes. The fizzing of bubbles in his ears masked the sound of the door opening. The door looked out into the living room toward Henry's desk and the open window. At this moment, as Henry stared into the darkness of the cloth, the door looked out onto something else entirely. The something else nudged the door inwards with its front leg. The front leg and its other 7 took the something else into the bathroom in silence. The something else could be described, if one was to take into account the 8 legs, 8 eyes, 2 pincers, and bulbous fur-covered back, as a tarantula. The tarantula rivaled the bathtub in size. The door creaked shut. Henry opened his eyes to the green pattern of the cloth. He removed it and turned to greet Tabitha. Instead, A mass of 8 blinking eyes and 8 crooked legs looked back at him. The tarantula spoke with a voice like dying bears being dragged over jagged rocks. It said, "Everything is quite all right." Henry stopped breathing entirely. His wide, white eyes searched the depths of the 8 black ones that glistened before him. Henry could see no sign of life in those wet coals, yet still it moved. One of the 8 legs moved towards the bath. Henry splashed it. The tarantula leapt to the ceiling, and there hissed and threw 4 of its legs outwards, making itself as big as an impractically large umbrella. Henry made himself small, and cried out. It might have been words. Tabitha slept. Henry called to mind a prayer. "Oh Christ, oh Christ, oh shit, oh Jesus!" "I knew I should have waited for you outside," the tarantula said. It twisted on the ceiling and dropped without a sound onto the linoleum. It turned to face Henry, each leg moving independently in speed and direction of the others, as though they were 8 angular snakes biting at the floor. Henry shook his head. He readied his hands to splash again. "I am ravenous," the tarantula said. Henry tried to limit the psychological damage of its appearance by focusing exclusively on one spot. Henry spoke only to the eyes. The legs were not there. He spoke only to 2 of the eyes. "Please," Henry said. It was just a big dog. "What do you want?" A big dog with 8 legs and... oh, God. "I didn't get this big, eating flies and grasshoppers," the tarantula said, moving the pointed tip of a leg away from a pool of water. "Come out of there." Henry turned on the tap. The tarantula might have frowned. There was certainly grumbling. "I'll splash you," Henry said. "Don't come any closer. Listen, if my wife wakes up, she is good with spiders." The tarantula shifted. "I'm good with wives," it said. The bath was filled to the top, and Henry sunk into it as far as space would allow. He splashed a little towards the tarantula, and it rose up on its back legs and hissed, jerking away from the water. "Ghastly behavior," the tarantula said. "There really is no need for this kind of nonsense." "I'm not moving," Henry said with a frown. He lowered his head into the water, a balding crocodile. "You need to get out before your wife finds me." The tarantula turned its head towards the closed bathroom door. "It would be a waste. I couldn't eat too." The crocodile emerged. "Why me?" Henry said. "What made you pick me? What has Henry James Herman ever done to you? Why my house?" "Your window was open," the tarantula said. "I haven't done anything. We've never hurt anyone." "You're not being punished." "Not me, though. Not me. Not us. The guy across the hall? He's a shut-in. He shouts at kids and collects shrunken heads. All he does is watch game shows. He gets shrunken heads in the mail. I've seen them." "Your window was open," the tarantula said. "That's it? My window was open?" "That's it, Henry." "My wife needs me." "That doesn't matter to me, Henry." "Without me..." The tarantula moved slightly, so that it could appear to shake its head. It was actually more of a tilt due to the structure of the head's connection to the body, but the illusion was still of a shaking head. It had clearly practiced the maneuver at home. "I have money," Henry said. "What do you presume I would spend money on?" "Just take it. Take anything you want." The tarantula inched forward. Henry backed up. "Please don't kill me," Henry said. "Please." The tarantula looked around the bathroom. It used its legs to spin and rotate its body to allow its quite inflexible head to take everything in. The wiggling motion reminded Henry of an exotic dancer and chilled him to the bone. The tarantula looked back to Henry. "Go get it. Go get the money for me," the tarantula said. "Really?" "Really. Get it." Henry stood up, shivering, and cupped his genitals. The tarantula moved back 8 tiny steps.
Is the check okay?
The hair on the tarantula's back was standing on end.
A check will be fine,
it said. Henry placed a foot on the side of the bath.
You promise not to kill me?
You have my word,
the tarantula said, scraping its words out through gritted pincers.
As a gentleman.
Henry froze and studied the pincers. They were big enough to grab his entire head. A moment passed, and he blinked himself free of them. He met some of the tarantula's eyes.
What?
The tarantula said.
What?
Henry said.
Get my money! Get it!
Henry slinked back down into the water.
I left my checkbook in work.
You don't need it,
the tarantula said.
You're free to go.
Really? Why?
Your wife. She needs you. You know.
Henry slumped in the water. He looked at the mirror cabinet and saw in it the reflection of the bathroom ceiling.
We lost a child,
Henry said.
The Lord took her away.
The tarantula shifted uncomfortably. Okay, Henry said. He stood up. He did not cup his genitals. You can leave.
You first,
the tarantula said. Henry saw the clever trap and kicked water at the tarantula and cursed.
So nothing we do matters? I'm dead because I left the window open? Nothing else we've ever done makes any difference?
The tarantula spoke slowly and clearly.
Not to me.
Henry sat on the back edge of the bath, with his feet in the water.
It should matter,
he said, holding his head in his hands.
It should.
The tarantula crept forward, its voice low as Henry sobbed into his palms.
You have no point, Henry. None of you do. You're just beasts. It's good enough for me.
The tarantula reached the bath and its front 2 legs pushed up off the side.
It's good enough for dogs and fish. It's good enough for the millions of humans who die every day who you don't love. There are no exceptions, Henry.
Tabitha rubbed her eyes, walked to the television and turned it off. Henry looked down at his ugly, hairy feet in the water and saw nothing else. He didn't see the tarantula slowly climbing into position around him. He saw only ugly feet and heard only the tarantula's voice.
Nothing you could ever do would have amounted to anything, Henry. You are animals, here to serve your own bodies. When you die, you are dead. Your child is in a box in the ground.
Its hot breath smelt of sulphur.
It's my turn to be served now, Henry. My body needs something.
The tarantula's front legs leaned against the wall behind Henry. At full stretch, it was large enough to completely engulf him in its legs.
Meat,
it said.
You're all just so much meat.
Tabitha closed the window above Henry's desk. She picked up a downturned photograph. In it, Henry and Tabitha smiled in a hospital bed and looked down at their daughter. Tabitha placed the photograph back face down and headed for the bathroom. The tarantula's face lingered above Henry's throat.
This will be over quickly,
it said.
You will be over. You'll have your own box in the ground. I can't think of a better reward for all the nothing you've done.
Henry cried.
You're wrong,
he said, and louder.
You're wrong.
The door opened. Tabitha screamed. Henry kicked out at the spider as it turned, sending it onto its back on the floor. He leapt on top of it with both feet, and its legs ripped at his skin as he stamped through the fragile torso and landed feet first in the tarantula's insides. Black blood sprayed up Henry's body, over his uncupped genitals and onto his face. Henry stamped again and again as the tarantula roared, and its legs tore at his flesh. Black and red blood hit the walls. Tabitha took the bathroom scales and slammed them with both hands down onto the tarantula's melon head. It burst across the linoleum. The tarantula's legs stopped moving. Its roar quieted to a gasp, which quieted to nothing. The tarantula died.
"Oh, God,"
Tabitha said.
"Oh, God. Oh, shit. Oh, Jesus."
She held Henry.
"Where is she, Tabby?"
Where's our girl?
Henry said. He couldn't look at her. Tabitha stroked Henry's intestine-slicked hair.
"She's gone.
She's gone. She's in heaven." The black blood of the tarantula pooled up about them as they kneeled together on the floor, holding each other.
"Do you really believe that?"
Henry said. Henry looked at Tabitha. Tabitha's eyes searched the floor for words and found nothing. Henry had words, but he did not have the heart to speak them. Henry, for the first time, thought not of angels. He thought not of grand plans and mysterious ways. A scraping, scratching sound began. Scratches on linoleum. Life returned to the tarantula's broken legs. They moved slowly, cautiously. A hiss of breath was drawn. The remaining eyes on the tarantula's head began to blink. The pincers began to creak back into action, with its half-smashed face dribbling blood. The legs stretched out, big enough to touch the ceiling, feeling around the room. Henry and Tabitha let go of one another and stood apart. Their eyes did not meet. The tarantula spoke. Henry knew then it would not die.
"Beasts,"
it said.
"You beasts."
Henry thought of a small box in the ground. For the first time, Henry let himself see the dead animal inside it.
Chilling tales for dark nights.